Hey, what's up, you amazing hackers? Hope you're all doing well today. Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to teach you a little bit about API hacking, about APIs in specific, and this is just going to be a little bit of a condensed version of what it's going to be like when we're going to have our 3-day API boot camp. First of all, it's so good to see you. Please grab a seat, take your popcorn, and enjoy the show. Uh, there's a lot of people here from India. That's freaking awesome. I saw some Texas coming by as well. You guys are freaking awesome. Poland, I have somebody who would love Poland. It's very, let's just say that I love your guys' fireworks. Let's put it that way. All right, my friends, let's talk about APIs though, and we'll get a little bit of a break today as well, of course, after the presentation. But first, we have a few things to talk about. First of all, I am going to give away some stuff. So I'm going to give away some of my throughout this webinar, some of my bootcamp seats. There's going to be 3 seats available. That's going to be for a giveaway. And then we have some seats that are going to be, of course, everything else is, all of these seats are going to be 50% off. But what I was going to say is we're going to have bug bounty guides that we're going to throw away. We're going to have an essentials guide that we're going to throw away. We're going to have a lot of stuff basically. And we're going to start with the first one, the bug bounty coupon. Let's start with giving you guys that worth staying until the end. There's 10 copies available, so I would hurry if I were you. Now, just do that while we wait. There's maybe gonna be some more people coming. First of all, I'm going to say this is also recorded, so you can watch it back. No worries if you missed something. We're going to get started with what is an API. This is material from our upcoming bootcamp, also from our upcoming certification program, because we already own CNWPP. If you're interested in that, cnwpp.net. Not going to go too deep into that right now. Don't go to the .com. Promise you, don't go to the .com. But copy is going to be the extension of that. First of all, we're going to have to start with what an API basically is. First of all, the definition. What does this stand for? Application Programming Interfaces. Fine, Uncle Red, that's amazing, but what are we actually achieving with an application programming interface? Okay, so let me share my screen. That's gonna be important, I think, if I do that. If I ever forget that, don't hesitate to let me know. There we go. So, oh, that's the wrong presentation. It's fine, it's fine. I've already given out this coupon anyway. It's fine, all's fine. You know that meme where the house is on fire and the dog's like, all's fine? That's basically me right now. So the application programming interfaces, sometimes applications are going to have to talk to each other. Like, for example, if you have an application and you want to display the weather, I have weather on my watch here, so that's fine. My watch doesn't have a weather service on it. That's not how it works. My watch basically talks to an API, and that API presents it with weather data, for example, in JSON format. And then my watch, it can display it however it wants to, depending on the format it gets. It can display that in a GUI, for example. Sometimes those apps need to communicate, but it can be on different levels, of course. OS, web. We're going to focus mainly on web APIs right now. So I don't think I have to explain the importance of APIs in today's digital age. Everything is basically communicating through APIs. There, there's so much like happening in the world of APIs because you have people that are wanting to take everything to the cloud. You have people that are going back from the cloud. It is a different architectures that these APIs can have. It's quite an expansive world. And that is good because if you know those details and other people don't, you have an advantage over other people. It's the same as with mobile. You'll have an advantage over other people if you know mobile hacking. There's basically different types of APIs. We have REST APIs, SOAP APIs. People often compare the two, but you can't really do that because, I'm not going to go too deep into it right now, but you can compare them to a certain level. Let's just keep it at that. GraphQL is also in there. If you've ever worked with GraphQL, it can be a database API in that instance, operating system APIs, library and framework APIs. I mean, I'm sure that we've all had the sometimes used, well, if you're a programmer at least, you're gonna have used this extensively. Let me put it that way. If you're not a programmer, this might be new to you, which is why I think it's important that we go into the basics first. APIs, at least on web level, I think on all levels basically, work on the request and the response model. So you give the request, you get a response back. On web, those use the HTTP methods that we're used to: get, post, put, delete, and we get a status code back. Okay, simple enough. Those are some basics of APIs. We have different components of an API. We have endpoints. An endpoint is going to be functionality. For example, just a function returning a calculation. That calculation will need different parameters. What's your first parameter? The second parameter, what type of calculation do you want to do? It will have headers and a payload or a body. That body is not always required, but the other ones aren't either. Like for example, you will always need some headers, but you don't need, well, let's just say that sometimes you might need headers. And what do I mean by that? Like for example, an API key. You won't always need an API key. Sometimes you put that API key in your headers. Parameters, those are usually going to be required, but again, not always. If you're just going to request data, a list without any specifications, you can just request an endpoint and it will give you that list without the need for parameters. It's important to know the role of all of these and how they can interplay with each other. Next up, we move to authentication and authorization, because I've already told you guys about those headers, like those API keys. They can be in X-API-key header, or any specification how we want to call it, because if we make this API, we're basically going to determine which headers it's going to check and which ones it's not. All right, so very simple. If we can add one of those headers as an API key, that might be useful. That is also why you never share your API keys. So if I make an API key, I can use that API key to then request that API, for example, for Google Maps, and I might need that for making specific requests. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat there, because you can have a public API key. For example, if you use a service that is meant for your advertisements, for example. It's okay if your API key there is public, because there's requests being made throughout the application, so it's a bit of a mixed bag there. As for OAuth, that's a different type of authentication. Not going to go too deep into it in this course. JWT, JSON Web Tokens, also not going to go too deep into it. The basic authentication, that's a fun one. That's just your username and then a colon, your password, day64 encoded as a header. I know, wow, fantastic, but that's just the way it is. So common use cases of APIs, I'm not going to go too deep into this. Just know that, for example, my mobile app can fetch data, web applications can fetch data. I might need to update data. There's different use cases possible. And there's also different benefits to using these APIs, because if I use an API and I notice that a lot of requests are coming in and my APIs cannot handle it, I can scale those. They can work modularly, meaning that I have a module of APIs that work together that can be integrated with other modules. Time saving, of course, and again, your integration capabilities. Potential risks, I'm not going to go too deep into this. We all know that it can be a risk, but which ones exactly? That is why we're going to go into the OWASP top 10. What is important though is your API documentation and how to test APIs. Clear documentation is going to be important, and you just need to know that this documentation, and I'll show you later as well, it's usually generated by the developer. So if I don't want to document a function because I don't want it to be known, I don't document it. Just so you know, it just means that not that everything that's documented doesn't mean that that is everything within the application. We need to work with different tools to talk to these APIs. That you can use Postman there, you can use Swagger there, but even a basic curl command can help, and even just a web browser can help. Also put a link up here to Strava, to their playground. This is an example of one of those swaggers, but to be honest, we just have our notes API, which is on 172, there we go, 172.15105.5598502. I'll also put this link in the chat, by the way. There we go. That might be useful for you guys, and I'll look at the questions in a minute, by the way. But this is basically our standard version of an API. We have some API documentation here where you can see that you can authenticate, log in, register, then create a node, get nodes for a specific user, and search the nodes for that user. Now, if you were to look here, this is basically Swagger. Here you can see all of the different parameters you are going to need, like the body. You can see the possible responses, and I document this. This is all written by me. If I don't want to put something in here, I just don't, And then I can see which response content type is possible. Let's give it a whirl, shall we? So you can click the try it out button in the top right. So go to that Notes API, please, and then click that API documentation button. Here you can go to the get nodes for a specific user, for example, or create nodes, I don't care. And you can click try it out. Then you get a body which you can change things in. And if we execute it, we can see that we get our curl request. We can get the request URL and we can get the response. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because if I then try out this, for example, and I want to get nodes from user 0, I can see that I can get all of their nodes as JSON in a response. And this might be useful because I might be building, for example, let's pretend that I am some kind of big software conglomerate, I am Microsoft, and I want your OneNote, your nodes from OneNote, I want them to be available from all over the world. I can do that through API calls, and I can add a layer of authentication, which some of the astute of you might have already noticed I am missing here. I'm just missing my layer of authentication. And that's pretty bad because that is a pretty big exploit. I can create nodes in other people's names, but I can also get nodes from other people. So as you can already imagine, that is probably not supposed to happen because we do have that login functionality and we do have that register functionality. So as you can see, people should be able to log in and register. Now, next up, we've already looked at that API a little bit that we have here, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ways of communicating with these APIs. This may sound silly, but there's different ways, and I think you should know them all because sometimes you might be in a limited environment where you won't have your favorite tool available. And everybody's always irking me about, oh, do you really need to know all of these port scanning tools? Yes, 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 of course you do. What if I'm in an environment where I only have Netcat? Then I should be able to do a port scan with Netcat. And I should just be able to do the same right here. And as you will see, I'm going to open my Termius. I already have it open, I believe. Let me just open it real quick. So here, and this server, let me clear what I have on screen. I'm going to, and then make it maybe a little bit bigger. There we go. Do we have Nmap on here? Yep, we do. So I'm going to run an Nmap scan for this server, not on HTTP, of course, just a basic Nmap scan. And I would like to have the SV for banner enumeration, so I at least know what the hell's going on that port. As you can see, probably there's going to be a hell of a lot of servers available. But for some of these ports, if I open them on this server, I might not be able to have that link API documentation. I don't always know it. Like this is very clear because I gave you a clear link to the API docs. Very simple, very clear, but it might also be a little bit more confusing where you are not sure what these API docs are. And while this thing is scanning, I'm going to start up a new connection to that. And then we're going to start up a different tool. Come on, dude. We're going to start up a different tool as well. Because of course, Nmap is fine. It's fine, it's fine. This is what they, oh, right, I'm starting up the wrong server. I need to do the new lab server, I think. It's what my boss always says. It's fine, it's fine. Yeah, my client, of course. So let's see here. Now let's see, do we have FUF installed? No, let's just install it. I'm going to fuss a little bit. And what I want to fuss for is basically I want to fuss for API documentation lists. So let's go and see if we can find a Swagger word list. Swagger word list. And look what we have here. We do have quite a few. Now let's just API docs. You can see that API docs is in here. So let's just copy the first few lines. Let's make a new file, nano, and let's call that the docs.txt. There we go. All right. And then we can fuzz this with fuzz a dash u. And then it's very simple. We just take the URL. We know that this is on port port 502, and we need to remove this HTTP again. Now, what am I missing from my command? My word list, of course, and that's gonna be the docs.txt file. I did something wrong with my command apparently. Fov-u. Yeah, I think the dash u needs to go first. That's probably what I'm doing. Oh no, the fuzz. It's like this, right? Fuzz and then dash. Or there we go. So as you can see, we have some issues here. Apparently, progress 12. We have errors 12. Okay, so that didn't go quite as expected, but I'm trying to give it a little bit of a fuzz here. Oh, of course, because I didn't give it the HTTP. Duh, Wes, come on. But this is basically the way you can fuzz your API documentation. So this is important to know that you need to sometimes do this. If you find an API, this should basically be your first action, trying to find that API documentation. And what you'll often find is that you'll have something like this. Now, is something that is very useful to a computer, but is not per se useful to a human. How do I put this into something that I can use and translate? I can use Postman for this, for example. This is just one of the many, many tools that you can use. I'm just going to switch to the lightweight client for now. And here we can, oh, right. Yeah, can we import? No, that's a girl request. So I'll have to log in for a moment. Otherwise, it's not going to allow me to do that. It's a little bit of a shame that Postman is requesting people to log in now. Let's just sign in for a moment. Now again, Postman is just one tool, of course. I can use multiple tools for this, as example was given before. Just a simple curl command, and this is getting annoying around my wrist. One moment, so I can silence this. There we go. There we go. Now let's add a list from our workspace. So we pasted that URL in here, and now you can see that it is trying to make a Notes API collection. There already was one, so that's not too bad. But the problem is, the moment I try to do something like this very simple, get notes from a specific user, and I can set that user, of course, I am not going to be able to do it. So there goes something, God knows what. You can see already here that it did not fill in the base URL, which is important. You need to be able to troubleshoot this a little bit, and you see here that base URL thing. If I go to this notes, copy URL, and I go to the variables here, I can change this. So let's do that for a moment. Let's change that. There we go. And now let's do the request. I have an error again. Some people might know what this is, especially orgists should know what this is, but this is the problem of me not pressing Control S or Command S. I didn't save, and that's a problem, of course. There we go. Now I'm able to at least get to the server. I apparently still did something wrong. To troubleshoot this, I can go to my console and I can see that I left that A in somewhere. That's not good, of course. Here we go. If I fix this, we can see that the request does go through. Very useful to import this type of documentation into something like Postman so you can work with it more easily. And what I sometimes like to even do is make a simple Python request to interface with the, what am I saying? A Python script to interface with this. And you can very easily do that these days. Please make me a Python script that can interface with this API. Simple, isn't it? It's very simple. As we can see, it creates the script for us. It's not that I like AI, of course, I don't like AI. No, no, of course not, of course not. Never. I would never do such a thing. But this makes it very, very easy these days to work with these types of. If you want a script, you just post it in, done. Those types of jobs, very, very cool. The only problem is that you might have to be able to debug because, let's be honest, sometimes ChatGPT likes to take a little bit of the right mushrooms and hallucinate up the ass. So you have to be careful with that, but that's okay. All right, my friends, let's see if there are any questions. And before we go on to the questions, I do have to say, and this is very, very important, I have Sir Hagelot the Fifth on my shoulder, and Sir Shaggle, or near me, I should say, and Sir Shagalot is very, very hard to please. He is not easily content. Just so you know, you'll have to work really, really hard to make him happy. Just so you know. Just so you know. I'm just giving you a heads up, that's all. There we go. Let's see. Can you use the tone to grab an API key to Sorry. I'll get to those questions in a moment. So nothing specific about what we've gotten so far. That's good. If you have any questions about what we have so far, just let me know. Of course, I will get to all of your chats after the presentation. I don't want to just disrupt the flow. That's why. No worries. There's nothing bad about your questions at all. I love questions like that, and I love interaction, of course. Now let's talk a little bit about the OWASP API Top 10. Oh, one of my favorites, OWASP Top 10 for APIs. Now, you may or may not like this. This is something that I love. We have the 2019 version and the 2023 version. There are discrepancies, though, well, differences, I should say. There are things the same. But one thing is very, very obvious. This is only a top 10 vulnerability. Only a top 10, nothing more than that. It's important that you realize that. But that being said, it is a good, like as you can see, it is a good resource for us. Now, I'll be mostly focusing on OWASP API Top 10 2019 today, and I'll be going through it in in a theoretical way. If you would like to see the really practical way, please come to our bootcamp. I would love to show it here, but I need to keep it a little bit short, of course, because I also need to go to bed. I need to get up at 6 a.m. Lovely, lovely. I love getting up at 6 a.m. But enough complaining from my end. Let's talk about the OWASP top 10. Number one. How can we get to? Well, it's okay. So this is just broken object level authorization. This is a type of broken authorization, and here we are looking at the object level. You can also do function level or property level. So think about that. If you have an API usually works based on objects. So I have an object like a note. A note is an object which you should have authorization for. If it's not there, that authorization, okay, fine, but that's broken object level authorization in that case. As function, in this case, would be, for example, let's go back to our notes API or just this one. A function would be this. So let's say that I need to be logged in to get the athlete. Just this value, I don't have to fill in anything here. All I need to do is be authenticated. So that's a function that is not specific to an object because I don't refer to an object here. A property would be, for example, if I could adjust the athlete type of other people. That would be a property level authorization issue. I hope that's clear. That might be a little bit confusing sometimes, but it is important to know that there are three broken authorizations possible on API level and potentially even more. And the fact that you'll see what falls under this, it's quite expansive sometimes. Talking about broken user authentication, what is authentication? The difference between authentication and authorization? I often ask this because it's very confusing. If I authenticate, I log in. If I authorize, I'm already logged in and I just ask, do I have permission for this function? Broken user authentication says it all. There's something wrong with that user authentication. There might not be rate limiting, allowing for password stuffing. There might be something like SQL injection in there. There's a heap of possibilities which could be for your broken user authentication. As for excessive data exposure, this is a fun one. Usually when I make an API, I also have some kind of GUI to present to the user the information that they need. Let's say that the user wants to view their credit card number. Normally, you only see like the first digit and a few of the last digits of your credit card number, but never the whole thing, right? Now, imagine that there's some smart developer who thinks, let's just put those X's there in the GUI. Let's not do that on the API level. The problem though is that sometimes attackers can talk to that API and then they have that data available, that full credit card number, instead of just that number with the X's on them. Big problem, of course. Lack of resources and rate limiting, that is clear, I would say. APIs should restrict the number of requests, but also the size of the requests and the number and size of the resources that can be requested. So there should be a limit basically on what you can submit for kind of data, but also what you can request for kind of data, both in size and in amount. And it should be properly configured as well, of course, because sometimes it's not fully missing, it's just badly configured. Broken function level authorization. One more time, authentication versus authorization, logging in versus checking. If I'm even allowed to do something like that, a function would be the slash athlete where I'm not referring to an object directly. When I'm referring to an object directly, it would be an IDOR or a broken object level authorization. IDOR stands for insecure direct object reference in this case, of course. When it comes to mass assignment, this is a very fun one. I found a lot of issues with this. Basically, imagine that we go back to that object, to that nodes API that we had before. Here, the objects are the nodes, right? An object has properties, like, for example, let's try this out. Let's get users one nodes. A node has a content, an identifier, and a title. Let's say that I am able to, so I'm generating this object. Usually I'm going to auto-generate the object, right? So I want to be a little bit lazy as a developer. I auto-generate this object and I auto-generate getters and setters. So normally you shouldn't be able to set some of those properties, like your account type. You should never be able to change that to administrator. Broken property level authorization. That's the same as this mass assignment thing, or at least very, very similar. This is something that I did find a lot of bugs with. Just to be clear, this is something that in bug bounty hunting has helped me quite a lot. because I would just go to the user settings and I would save, and then I would see what kind of properties were set and what kind of properties would be returned in the response. And if there's any discrepancies, I would take the parameters from the response and paste them in my request. That's a good way to check for mass assignment. When it comes to injection vulnerabilities, I think that's clear, but there's just so many injection vulnerabilities. That's the problem. You need to know so many different injection vulnerabilities. SQL injection, NoSQL injection, and there's just a ton of them. The problem is that you can't know all of them by heart, of course. So you'll just have to dive in and see which ones fall under this category to a degree. And proper asset management means just that I have an API running, but I have no idea how many APIs I have, what their IPs are. I'm just lost, and this can create ghost APIs, which might be a problem. Insufficient logging and monitoring, I say there should always be alerting there as well, because of course, if you have monitoring, fine. If you have logging, fine. But if no bells go ringing when you get hacked, you're still fucked. So that's a little bit of a presentation. I can see already as well that we have quite a few ports open, or at least if we scroll all the way up there we go. We can see that we have quite a few ports open, but this isn't even everything yet. Now, how am I going to do a request to here? I'm just going to use the browser for now. I'm special, I can do that. And then I can see there's nothing found here. But what if I go to that API docs thing? Again, I can see some nice API docs. I wonder what could be on here. And then I can basically, for encode an image, apparently upload it here. Maybe there's other functionality that I haven't been able to explore yet either. Again, fuzzing. And I need to go through all of these ports like that because I don't really know what they are. FileMaker? What the hell are you? What the hell are you suggesting here, Nmap? That's apparently it's oh, of course it's getting requested over SSL. There we go. We might have something more. API docs. Nothing in this case. Maybe something else. Who knows? There are also more ports open, of course, because I just did a fairly basic port scan for now. But it is important to know how to discover your targets and how to find vulnerabilities effectively. Thank you so much if you stuck around for this long, because that's my basic introduction to hacking APIs. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me see, there were some questions, I believe. I'm going to go to those now. It's 4 a.m. and holy crap. Yeah, please do it ethically and legally. I have to disclaim that always. Uganda, nice. Madrid, Brazil. You guys are from all over the world, and some of you guys are up on like 4 a.m. That's crazy. Now, what I haven't done yet is I haven't given out my next coupon yet, which is gonna be the XSS guide. Let's do that quickly. So I can go through all of your questions then, and you can jump on that XSS guide. For those confused API, yes, indeed. Good job there, Emerald Wolf. Thank you for clarifying. Really appreciate that. Can you use the DOM to grab an API key because it is an object variable? That is a great question, Emerald Wolf. And what Emerald Wolf is basically asking is, when you have a website, you have your source code and you have your document object model, which is all around your source code, basically your return, for example. I am on studio.youtube.com now. I need to know where I go if I click this return button. That's my document object model. And he's asking, from that document object model, can I then grab an API key because it's in an object variable? I don't know out of the top of my head. I would think that maybe if you have some type of cross-site scripting available through DOM cross-site scripting, that might be an option. That's a good question. I'm gonna get back to you on that. Thanks. I really appreciate it, Emerald Wolf. Don't break the server. Yeah, guys, Orgus has been working on this server very, very hard. If you break it, just let him know. He loves hearing about how you can break the server. He just loves hearing about that stuff. Oh, and I need to. Oh, this one will be interesting. We have 3 seats for the API bootcamp. Who's gonna be first? Who's gonna be first? Fergs Buster and Go Buster, which one is faster? That is a great question. To be honest, for me, it doesn't matter all that much. It's not like I do so many scans that seconds are going to make a difference or even minutes, you know? I just run all of these things in parallel, but it is a good question. I might have to do a comparison video on that. Can't install Fuff, but you're using Parrot. Like, that's your problem. You're using Parrot. Parrot just sucks, dude. How to piss off a community in one sentence. Laughing my ass off. Yes, you do want to make Haggis happy, the guy. I don't know, because believe me, like last time I didn't make that guy happy. He was shagging two girls, and then I had 25 rats out of nowhere. Fuck's sake. Hey, please upload this video to YouTube. Of course, this will be uploaded for sure. Good question there. At Greenet, yes, you can use FUB for subdomains. Indeed. Oh, my text jumped there. I see now a better tool. I don't see the limitations. Go bust to refer books. What I just honestly use for API actually is content discovery of Burp Suite. I just like it because it can do different things at the same time. It can do content discovery, meaning you can do file discovery, you can do directory discovery. The thing is, it can just not do parameter discovery at the same time, but it can do all of this shit recursively. So if it finds a directory, it can look for files in that directory. It's an awesome tool. Let's see. In real life, it's worth to check the API docs. The chance of having this slow it is definitely worth it, but you will have to fuss for it a bit. Fuss for it. Jesus Christ. Definitely, because the way you learn about this API is through API documentation, and it might not always be in this way. Sometimes you just have API documentation available. One of the things that I love to hack was no, not this one, Team Leader API docs. So as you can see, sometimes it's just like this as well. You have some normal API docs in which you will have to find your way. It's a little bit of a gamble, but this will be your very first step that you're always going to take. Good question, Black Crow. Let's see. Emerald Wolf says he wants to learn and try new things. Well, I have one more new thing for you guys, and you're gonna love that. This is an endless bundle, and I hope you guys have fun with it because this contains all of our current and future courses. Only one, though, only one. So be fast. Anyway, my friends, this was my little presentation so far on API hacking and API documentation. I would again like to remind you that our bootcamp is next week, and I'm going to lengthen the early bird. You can see that link right here. We're going to lengthen that early bird with just 2 more days. So if you do want a seat and you don't have one yet, I would recommend you get it as soon as possible. These do sell out rather quickly. So if you still want a seat, please do grab it. It's gonna be like this, but a lot better because we're gonna have a lot more time to talk and chat. If you have questions now, also please don't forget to ask. I would love to hear everything that you're still dealing with in terms of questions. It's important for me that you don't leave with too many unknowns here. Now, if you're not going to attend this boot camp, what I do want to give you is, at least through this session, is that you have a starting path, at least something to hold on to. There's more though. There's a lot more in our API bootcamp. You will see this as well. We're just going to go through a lot more SOAP versus REST, API authentication and authorization, your architectures, your documentation. I think it's important. Yes, indeed, Malware, we are back with our boot camps, and we appreciate all of the support that we get through them. It's amazing. It really is. We have gotten something for you this time that's, I think, better than ever, at least in my opinion, because I'm kind of sick of web. And yes, you heard me right. I'm sick of web. Why is that? Because I know that web is just a front. It's the same as, like I love web, don't get me wrong, to a degree, but it's the same as, for example, if I want to hack my car, I'm not going to hack the bodywork. I'm going to hack the freaking engine, aren't I? So, what am I going to hack when I want to hack the internet? The engine of the internet, which for me is APIs, for sure. Let's see, great presentation. Thank you so much, Black Crow. Really, really appreciate that. I hope you guys enjoy the courses. I hope you guys have a good night. And I hope you guys have a million bucks to show for it in the next stream. Please let me know of your successes. Tag me on Twitter. Let me know of your failures as well. It's important. I will let you know about mine. It's important that we keep each other up to date and realistic, very realistic, because we all fail. It's just a part of life. But the harder we fail, the bigger of a chance we have to make a comeback, in my opinion. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. You have been awesome. I would like to see you in the next one. Bye bye.